Hello everyone, welcome to the Global Water Future Visualization. I am Debajyoti Mondal and I'm from the University of Saskatchewan. So what we will be doing today is to see a glimpse of what the system can do, and we'll be running a few codes to provide you some experience so that you can understand whether this is the right platform for you that you might want to use. So I'll first give you some background. So let's me first start by telling that this is a platform built out of the collaboration of many people. The Shisha Mong here is one of the main developers who is working on this system. Now, the idea of the system is you have lots of models. It could be hydrological models, and they are producing geospatial data sets. You can have your own geospatial data sets, which may not be generated out of a model, but any sort of geospatial data. And there is a programmable visualization where you can write high-level codes, and people are expected to collaborate on the code to build visualizations, and there are APIs that you can use to build this visualization, and everything will be on the server. So if you have a high level computation which is intensive, then that could be offloaded to the server, and once you get the visualization, you will be able to do some interactive analysis, which are probably of interest of many users, from general users to stakeholders, and also useful for training and engagement purposes. So we started with basically hydrological models, and we saw that they are producing data. They are time varied to multidimensional and also larger scale. Often people try to compare different cycles and how many cycles the simulation has been run, and whether it has converged, and if it has converged, then at which location it converged and at which location it is not stable, and also whether the model outcome is actually matching the observed data set. Now, this is only not the entire problem area. When you are talking about geospatial data analytics, there are multiple common problems that comes up, like how do we reveal patterns in the data, especially if the pattern, if the data is spatiotemporal. So you have time series associated to each pixel of your display. And how do you reveal interactions between multiple data sets? And can you interactively explore the data sets, or explore so that you can connect the information from multiple data sources? How do you collaborate? How do you make decision? How do you compute statistics on top of this visualization and data sets so that it makes more sense, or you can reveal some information which are much more interesting and explainable. So we have been able to build visualizations out of common hydrological model outcomes. For example, here you can see you have a programmable interface where you can write code on the left, and then it will generate interactive dashboard on the right. So if you think of the full spectrum from data to the visualization, the all four phases uh, in are typically very important to the developers and modelers. From data, it could be varieties of format like shape files or netcdf files or text image combinations. And from that, you create a GWF platform database, and that is read by the programmable interface where scientists write the code and then finally get the visualization. So from programmable interface to visualization, probably scientists, industries, and others may be interested, and then the visualization part could be useful for general public as well as to the stakeholders and scientists. So these are some screenshots of some use cases we tried to build out of this platform. They are of varieties of data formats and varieties of scales and sizes. This is the one for SUMA, which is a hydrological model, and then this is another one for mesh. This is from CHM, and you can see GIF of this, where you can see millions of triangles are being explored interactively, where you can click and see the information on the left panel in the metadata section. And creating this visualization takes time because there are lots of data that you have to process in the server. So we are not going to do that today. We'll be using simple processing to visualize your special data sets, which are also very simple, just to familiarize yourself with the data sets. And this is the background that what the platform can do. And if you are interested to exploring it, you can always reach out to us. So uh, now let's go on the hands-on part, and we can talk more about the platform over there. So I'll first give you an address, and I'll also open up the same address. So this is gwf-vis.usask.ca, and then slash, and then v1 for version on, and then slash. So I'll copy this and I'll open my browser, and I will try to go to that address, and you will see something like this. So let's wait for a couple of for a minute to allow everyone to go to that address. So this is gwf minus vis and then dot usask dot ca, and then slash, then v1, and then slash. Okay, so can anyone confirm? Okay, so it is working good. Now we can start exploring what we have here. So first of all, you will all see there is a public directory over there, and if you click on this triangular shape, then you will see there is another directory called templates, and there are some .py files. So .py stands for Python files, and typically the backend of the system is written in Python, and the front end is also like Python, supports some Python-like environment. So we really do not want to go into much about Python coding, but we'll be talking about high-level structure of the code so that we can understand it easily. So before we go into the code, let's explore different parts of the system. So this is the script part. Here you can see there are some data sets that you can explore. Plugins, these are mostly for developers. We'll not be talking about this for now. And then files gives you all sort of files that are in the accessible using the public domain. Another thing, you can see that there is a guest icon on the top right. So that means you can click there and try to log in, but usually you need an account for that. So we'll not be going there to create any account or anything, because we can use this system and get an experience of how it works even without logging in. So what we are going to do first is to talk about the template codes. So we'll only talk about some template codes here, and then you can explore more on your own. So the first one is U15, unif.py, and this is a group of universities known as U15 group, and the data is taken from this link. So you can go over there and see that this is the U15 university, and we'll display this data set in this platform. Okay, so now how do we are going to do this? We already have a part of code, and the idea is that if you are not very used to in writing code, or if you are seeing this the first time, the idea is to understand the structure of the code and then probably modify it based on your needs. So I'll go through the code and explain a little bit what it does. Now, first, you can see there is this import GWF views. This is basically for importing the GWF visualization platform library. So once you import it, a lot of functionalities will be available to you. And the first line here, you can see GWF views dot load views config will load all sort of APIs and functions that we want to create maps. And once you have that loaded, you can say that, okay, this is this underscore config. This is a variable that will hold all this information, and anything that we want to add to our map, we'll have to add to this configuration, and then we can generate the final visualization, as you can see here by calling gwm_vis.render, and then we pass that variable visconfig. So from here, from line number 7 to all the way to line number 36, this is to create the configuration, and once you set all the configuration, you can pass that configuration to create the dashboard. Now, before I explain the code, let's try to run it and see what sort of visualization we get. So here on the right, you can see there is a triangle icon, and if you hover on it, it will say run. Okay, so if you run, then you get this new tab that contains a bunch of push pins, locations that you can see, and these are all those 15 university locations. And this is University of Saskatchewan, this is University of Calgary, and so on. So you can interactively explore the push pins, and you can zoom in, zoom out as usual, and you can see that there are little icons here. And there is satellite. So satellite is the version of the map that you can see on the background. And then there is U15. This is the layer where these pins are being shown. We call it an overlay. So if you disable it, then these pins will be gone, and then you can bring it back by enabling it again. Now, why we have this? Because you could have multiple layers of data visualized on the map. But this is a very simple visualization and simple data set, and we do not have many layers. Okay, so uh, that's our first visualization, and see whether people have any trouble visualizing this. Okay. Okay, so yes, so maybe you missed. So there is a question that the link is not working. So if you see that I have a slash after v1, perhaps you can double check. So this link is gwf dot minus vis dot usask.ca slash v1 and then slash. Okay, so if I miss a slash, it might not show up anything. So there's a slash that is needed at the end. Oh, okay, so that is working now. That's good. And we are talking about these templates, and then we talk about the first one, which is U15 University. This is the data set we are talking about. Okay. So there's another question that there is no latitude, longitude associated with this data. Yes, that's correct. We actually, when created the data sets, we added that so that we can visualize. So we'll come back to that. So yes, you are correct that that particular data set does not have latlan, but we collected the latlan and added to this data. And we are explaining the code. So this is GWF loading all these configure APIs into this variable visconfig. This could be anything. This is your variable, so you could say my variable and so on. In this particular case, we are using visconfig. Okay, so now after you have this variable, we want to add map elements. So GWF is dot add map element, and then GW, and then we pass this variable, and we say that, okay, activate a tile layer, and this is the satellite layer. This should be a satellite layer. Now this part is default because we are not logging in there is no saving option. So you can edit and run these files, but you cannot save it. So if you save this will not work because you don't have an account yet. But that's okay. We can change it and then run to see the visualization. So here in this particular case, I'm adding a map element, and this is all default, and GWF has configured a satellite layer that you have seen here on the back end, and this particular line will create that satellite layer, as you can see here, satellite. Okay, so now the next part is to set the view for the map. So you need to set the center of the map where the landing page will focus, and the zoom, so that it also can tell how focused it will be at the center. So in this particular case, we have zoom 5. So let me close the tab and run it again so that we can compare. So this is the zoom 5. We can see part of Canada and United States. Now, if I want to see the world, the full world, then maybe we can place 2 and then let's run it. Yes, now we have the full view of the world, and let's close it again. And this is the center. Now, if you want to change the center, this is latitude and longitude. So let's change it maybe to Italy. So I search Italy, latitude, longitude, and yes, simply you can put it here. You have to match the format. So if you put it down there, this is some decimal, comma decimal. So I want to have the same format here. Okay, that's it. And then if I run it again, okay, so now it is centered at Italy. As you can see the Italy here. And if you zoom out, you see the center is at Italy. So yes, this is the way you can change the center. And as I said, we will not be able to save the code, but we can edit and then let's check what happens. Okay, so now the dataset part. So you can see that dataset is accessible in the interface, and the dataset is in the dataset section. So this is under public datasets, and then U15. So if you look at the last one, this is U15.gwf TV. Okay, so question. So how do we create GWF TV on our dataset? Okay, so we'll come back to that. So as I told, there could be netcdf files, there could be shape files. So basically, to handle all these files, we'll need to have different type of data processings and APIs or functionalities out there. So today I will be talking about a simple one. We'll be talking about a simple one that is for processing CSV files. This is just to demonstrate. Now, if you want to load your data and large data sets and want to visualize them, probably you have to reach out to us so that we can set up the account, and then you can process your files using the data processing scripts that we have. But for today, we'll be talking about simple data sets, and we'll also show how to create this data format for simple CSV files. Okay, so now we can try to understand the rest part of the code. Now, once you have this GWF DB data sets, this is basically SQLite data files, if you know. It has lots of tabular data format. Anyways, we do not need to understand that much if you are not familiar with that. So let's create the data sets. This is a variable that holds this dataset link, and then you have to create a layer, which is this point layer. As you can see, push pins here. Now, whatever layer you create, and want to put into the map, we actually use the GWF API that has the functionality add map element. and we say that, okay, add this map element to the visconfig and then add a GeoJSON layer. So this is all default. So we are adding a GeoJSON layer, and this layer will hold various things as we specify in the properties. So once we have this GWF fields, and then we say that update the properties. Now, what is the property we are updating? We are updating the property of polygons variable, so which is the GeoJSON line. You can also talk about points because they are basically just points in our case, but it doesn't matter. This is a name. And then for these points, you say that, okay, we need a layer name. We say this is U15. You can see that this is basically the same thing as U15 that you can rename. So if you say U15 data or layer, so this is something that you can specify on your own. And type overlay is saying that it has to be on top of the map as an overlay, so that it you can actually select and deselect things. And then data source, you have to provide where the data will be coming from, and that is the dataset variable, and that is the dataset here that is linked with that variable. And then use push pins is true. So this will give you this default push pin type icons, and we'll be we'll run this part and see what happens, because we changed it like U15 layer. So we will see that U15 is just renamed to U15 layer. Okay, so this is very simple to edit the template code. And then what happens if you do not use push pins? So let's remove that and try to see. Okay, so now you see that by default these locations are shown by circles. And then if you want to get back push pins, you can just use push pins. Okay, so that is good. We understand how we create these points, how we have these layer interactions, but we don't yet understand how to get this metadata that you have after you select each of these fields. Now, to understand that, we just need to understand this line. Now, we have configured the layer, and to configure the sidebar element, you have gwf.add sidebar element, and you have to pass this config and tell that, okay, I want to add the sidebar element to my visconfig variable, and you do not need to update any of the properties. So we did not create any variable for add sidebar element. So you see that we created a variable for add map element because we want to update the properties of that element. And in this particular case, we do not need to update any properties of these sidebar elements, so we did not do anything like that. Okay, so I think that's basically it. And let me show you by removing this part what happens. So if I remove this part, then you will see that the left panel is still there, but it will not show anything. So you can select, but nothing is showing up. So that line actually links the pins to the metadata section. So I put it back and then run it, and then you will see that the interaction is working again. So so if I click a pin, it will show the associated metadata. Okay, so how are we doing? So any questions so far? Okay, so how do you know that these properties are available? Okay, so that's very good question. So there is a documentation for the whole system. So if you want to go beyond what is there already in the templates, then you can search for it in the documentations, and you can try that out in the code. So let me go there. So by clicking in this question mark, you can go to this documentation where you can have a fairly good description of how to use the system, and more details are at the documentation section. So you can see that there are some explanations of the code available, and the four APIs that are currently available to GWF. So add map element that will have the background map, add sidebar element, which is on this side panel where the charts and metadata will show up, add main view element, which are these controls, and then update properties. So for any of the first three, if you create a variable, you can update the properties of those variables to customize them. Okay, so yeah, that's good. Okay, so yes, so again, if you want to access the documentation, you can click on this question mark and you'll see more details. Okay, so this is our first one that we kind of explored, and let's try out a little bit more complex data set, which is the GDP data set. So what we have in this data set is basically you have a bunch of countries, and all these countries will be having the GDP values as time series for the last 10 years. And for this time series, we want to visualize them as line chart. And the idea is if I click on a country, it will show the time series on the left panel as well as the metadata associated to that country. So let's try it out. So I'll close all the other tabs. Okay, so and then run it. So this time it might take a few minutes depending on where you are located in this world. So we'll wait for a few seconds here so that the data is loaded. Okay, so you see that data loading took some time because this GeoJSON files has lots of elements because the country boundaries are zigzag. So there are a lot of segments that you have to render, and then you also figure out how to color them and so on. So it takes some time. Now, if you are able to see it, you will see there is not much color associated to this data or every country. And we want to talk about that. But first, let's see what happens if I click on a country. You see that I clicked on United States, and this is the part, Alaska and the other states. And once you selected the whole thing, and you can see the GDP as a line chart from 2001 to 2010. Okay, so in this particular case, you can see there are also dimension controls that was not before. So dimension in this particular is time, and the variable is GDP. Now, as you can see, these are drop down. That means you can add many dimensions and many variables, and that makes the system very powerful. So if you have sometimes for geospatial data sets that comes from hydrological models, you might have soil layers. That could be one of your dimensions. Time could be one of your dimensions. The number of cycles could be one of your dimensions, and variable could be precipitation, temperature, soil moisture, and many other things. So you can explore lots of combinations of them. But anyways, we have a simple data set where we only have the time series and the variable GDP, and that is shown on the left panel. And there is another thing that is new, which is the selection. Now, as soon as I select, I can pin the current value. For example, let's say we select Canada, and then we pin current, and this green color is highlighting Canada now, and you can see the line chart is also green. Now, if I want to compare this GDP growth of this country with, let's say, China, so I can select China, and you can see how it compares to Canada, and from 2001 to 2010, and I can pin the current, which is China, and that is in blue, and I can actually compare multiple countries. So, for example, if I want to compare Russia, so let's select Russia, and then pin current, and that is in purple. So you can see now we have a comparison among all these three countries. Okay, so now not only that, it can be done dynamically. So if I select any other country, that will be gray. So, and you can see the gray is changing based on the country that I select. So if I select United States, you can see that is the top one for the high GDP growth between 2001 to 2010. So this is useful when you want to compare multiple elements or the time series of multiple elements. And similarly, you can select one of these and then remove that. So I selected blue, which is China, and I removed that, and then you see only two line charts, which are Russia and Canada, and the gray one that is currently selected, which is China, and I can always change the gray one and compare it with the ones that we have. So this is basically the functionality that we have created with this simple part of the code that you have here. And how do we get there? We get there by first having this initial config, this part from line number 3 to line number 9. Is for adding the map element, which I said that this is the default. We don't have to worry about changing it. This is out there already. Okay, so I have a question here. So can we change the satellite layer to something like a street map? Okay. The default one that we have in version 1 only allows us, only provides us to use the satellite layer, and of course, the advanced versions will provide you with more configurations. So once you have an account, you will have access to more features. Okay, so now you can see that you can set a view for the map. We explained that. So in this particular case, our zoom level is 2, that is showing the whole maps. And then the data set, in this particular case, the data set is coming from gdp.gwf. So, and you can see in the data set section, there is a data set gdp.gwf with db, and then we again create the GeoJSON layer, and in this particular case, they are not really points. They are basically, sorry about that. I clicked on the wrong file. So, okay, so you are here. So in this particular case, they are really polygons. Why polygons? Because, yes, so each of these countries have a polygonal chain boundary. That's why they are called polygons, and you can see that we are updating the properties of the polygons. In this case, we are saying the layer name is GDP. We said that, okay, this is the layer that we can enable disable, and then we can type overlay and data source dataset. Okay, so now it is pretty similar to the one that we had before. So if I want to see what happens if I remove everything and then render it. Okay, so if I just do this, you'll only see the polygons of the countries. Now, again, it will take some time. So let's see what happens. It will basically render all the polygons. You see now it is rendered, and you can only see the country boundaries, and you only have the polygon layers. So if you click or unclick, then these will be enabled or disabled. You select something, nothing will happen. So the rest part of the code is basically to create all those. So let's put it back. Okay, so the next one that we have is the variable control. So I'll talk about that. Let's see. Okay, so here you can see that there is a variable control. As I said, if your database has multiple variables, you can have multiple variables over there. But for this public facing dashboard, we did not provide that functionalities yet. So you can do it, but you will need to have the data processing script available, and you have to have an account. So now there is this variable control, and this is added to the main view element. So anything you add on top of the map as an element that you can interact with is the main view element. And here we have two of them. One is dimension, the other is variable. So variable control, here you want to put the width and link that to the data set. So these are the only two properties you have to configure. So we create a variable which is variable control. And again, this is the functionality that we use to update the property of any variable. And then the width is 40 rem and the data source is dataset. Now, similarly, we add dimension control, which is GWF add main view element and then dimension control. And this is again another variable. You set the width and link it to the dataset. Okay, so this is fairly simple. And then the sidebar element, we talked about that single line where we do not need to update any properties. So add sidebar element, pass the visconfig and link it to metadata section, which is here. The metadata that you can see for each country, you have some information associated with it in the database, and you can see that. Okay, so now multi-select control. So what is the multi-select control? You can add user selections. Now, without this, you will not be able to select these countries and pin. So you can see here, we can select a country, pin it, and select a country, and then pin it. So we can compare multiple countries in the same line chart. So this allows us to select multiple elements, multiple polygons, and that is enabled by this add sidebar element, which is user selection, and the slot top. That means it should be added at the top. Okay, so now there are some configurations that you might try, like slot bottom and so on. But typically, if you don't want to change that, that is okay. And then line chart, we want to add a line chart, and you can see that GWF is add sidebar element, and then this config line chart, and then this config will and the GWF will update the property of the line chart. The line chart is the very new thing that we did not have before. And to set the properties, you of course have to link it with the data set. You have to link it with the two controls that you have here. One is dimension control, the other is variable control. Now, the first one, the variable name is GDP, the dimension name is time. Now, if you see, that's the end of the code of configuration, and then we can pass this config to render the GWF visualization. Okay, so this is something that we are discussing before, that this is all good, but we don't really have much information because these two countries are very much uh, colorful, but the rest don't have that much GDP, so we can't really see much information. But there is a way we can use colors uh, to split the quantiles. So the top 25 quantiles will be using this color. The next 25 quartile will be using this color. And that way we can split the countries into 4 groups. And to do that, we can actually use color config. So let me actually show you. So if you go to the template, there is a color config where you can see the color scheme available, and you can choose the quantile one like this, and let's put it there. So I choose the color scheme, so I copy it and I put it right before the data set. Okay, so this is the color scheme. And if I don't specify anything, it is for all the variables. But right now we have only one variable. So if we have quantile, then that's it. And then color scheme needs to be specified in the polygon layer. So I put a comma after data set, and then color scheme is the color scheme variable here, and then run it. And because it is quantile, computing this group will take a little time. So we might have to wait a little longer than the one that we actually had before. Now let's see whether we can have the desired outcome. A question. Yes, so if we want to have flags of the countries in the metadata, yes, we can put images in the metadata. That's possible, and that will show up here. Yes, you can customize a lot of different properties, and then the data set actually needs to have logo so that you can read and render it there. And by the way, so we were talking about 4 groups, and you can see that these are the 4 groups that we already have and color coded. And we now have more information, but we have the legend missing. So let's create a legend. So we can use the same color scheme for the legend. So we can add GWF images that add main value element, main view element, and we can actually want to configure the properties, because you see the legend will be added like dimension control, variable control, so we need to add it in the main view element. And in the main view element, we can actually use this visconfig, and then we can say, okay, we are going to add a legend, and we need to update the properties of the legend. So in this case, the data source will be the data set, and we need to provide the color schemes. We can run it to see how it looks. Okay, so you now have a legend that actually shows the countries in 4 different groups. And the blue is the lowest and the red is the highest. And you can also change the colors that you can show here. So sometimes you want to use color maps which are color blind safe, and there are a lot of options available that you can use, and you can choose it from the color config. So let me show the color config file here. Okay, so you can see that there are options to specify the colors you need. In particular case, when we defined this is blue, green, yellow, red, instead of that, we can use a sequential scheme, or maybe use an ordinal scale or quantile scale. So yeah, so you can explore all these options. I think this is loaded by now. Okay, so you can see that the legend is there as well as the countries are colored accordingly. So that's good. And then we can see that there is another file here, which is Suma. This is actually a hydrological output, model output. And you can see that the details of that model here. If you go into the link. Okay, so after you get the output from here, we create this GWF TB, and then you can explore it, and this is the code for it. So you can see different types of charts and visualizations. And I was talking about there could be multiple dimensions or variables, and here you can see multiple variables. And here the value is kind of the time series of all these polygons, and you can see for each polygon you can see its individual line chart for a particular variable that is selected in the variable control, or you can compare for this polygon multiple variables. This is interesting if you want to understand correlations. So you can actually zoom in here. Let me grab the mouse. So you can actually control and zoom in or scroll your mouse to actually change the scale. You can also load a bigger chart if you add this element instead of on the side view element on the main view element. You can also have multiple types of chart, in this particular case radar chart. And of course, you can also compare multiple things or multiple polygon values by pinning them. And you see that the radar chart will have all these things. So you can actually explore or filter them by selecting and deselecting these variables. Okay, so this is about the summa, and you can see this is also not using any color scheme. That means it is using the default sequential color scheme. So if you want to break them apart by quantile, you can do that. And now that you have time, you can actually see that what happens at a particular time stamp. And if you change, you can see the colors are changing based on the value associated to each polygon at that particular time stamp. Okay, so this is all, and then we want to actually show you a little bit about how to process a database. So let me quickly show that. Okay, so to see that, we need to go to the documentation. So I'll just select the documentation here. So version 1, and then I will click on the documentation. And in this case, you can see that there is this extras where you have this data processing.html. So this is the one that we can download. So I'll just download this. Okay, so after I download this, I can actually put it. So let me show you a default data set. So this is the test.csv. And this CSV file has a very simple format. So the ID goes from 1 to whatever number of rows you have, and each row is a data point. So if you think each row is a country may have a property 1, may have a property 2, may have a latitude and longitude, and then you might also have time series associated to them, like what happened in 2001, 2002, and 2003. Now, this is a simple file format. Whatever number of properties that comes before lat long will be thought as the metadata property for that particular country, and whatever comes after will be thought of as the time series property of that particular country. So let me show you how do you process it. So in this particular case, I can just open the data processing file here. And you can see it is asking to load the CSV file, and let's load the CSV file. And you can see that I have this simple CSV files. We are only doing it in browser to give you some idea how you can load the GWFs, create the GWFs DB for CSV files. And there are many data processing files for netcds and GeoJSON and other stuff. But that is if you are interested, you can reach out to us and we can talk about your data processing needs. And then you can process. And after you process, it will ask you the location to save. So let's save it here. So simple. And then save it. It will ask you to give a name of the data set. Let's give the same name, simple. And okay, what is the unit? Unit could be degree centigrade for temperature, and in this particular, just a random unit, and then okay. It is optional. You can just may ignore it, and it says it is done. So let's try to see whether it created anything. Okay, so we now have a simple GWF TV here. Now the question is, this is my own data set. How do I visualize it? Because all the things are happening on the server. So let's go there. So yes, all these databases are in server. So how do I actually link or upload my data in the server? So there is a way to allow the server to know where your data set is and visualize it. So there are many ways. You have to have the cross-language resource sharing enabled, and this can be done by simply installing Node.js. There are many options. One of the simple one is Node.js. So if you search for Node.js, you'll see the download Node.js, and there are installers for Windows, Mac OS, and so on. Now, if I install it, then I'll have the ability to let the server know where my resource or data set is. Okay, so I'm using Windows. Okay, so question, can we use Python server for it? So yes, you can use Python server, but enabling the CORS across this platform resource sharing is a little bit challenging if you are not familiar with coding in Python, but yes, it's definitely doable. So I am installing it. Okay. Okay, so once I am done installing, I'll open the command prompt cmd. Yes, you can just type here. This is the shell. It could be shell if you are using Linux or terminal. And in Windows, this is command prompt. So if I open that, I have to write one single line here to enable the CORS. So let me finish the installation. Okay, it is almost done. Okay, so it is done. So finish, and then once you are done, there will be npx available. So if you type npx, you'll see that there is entering npm script environment. So that means it is there. So npx, and then I write http minus server, and then dot, and then I'll say minus minus or dash dot cors, which will enable it. So if I run this command, then it will actually enable the cross-language resource in my local host. So I'll actually do it again. So I'll copy this command and paste it here so that you can see it clearly. So npx http minus server dot is the file location, is the current directory, minus minus cors. Now I'll close it, and then I'll actually go to desktop and this location, because where this is here where my file is located. So I'm running cmd again. Okay, so now I first go to this particular location by changing the directory to desktop. And then in the desktop, I have this another directory called public, so cd public. Okay, so now I can do the same thing. So that is npx http minus server, and dot is the current directory, and minus minus cors. Okay, Okay, so now you can see that this is the location where I can access my local host. So I copy this and I paste it. You can also write localhost and then clone 8080, and that's the same thing. And here you can see there is the simple GWF DB. So instead of going to this directory, now what I want to set here is this my local directory, localhost 8080, and then what is the dataset name is simple, and that's it. And let's run it. Once you run it, I zoom it out because, yeah, so now you can see these are the three dots, because in the CSV file that we had, let me show you again. Okay, so there are only 1, 2, 3 rows, and these 3 rows are corresponding to these 3 points. So if I click on this, this is a time series 2001 to 3. This is the time series that corresponds to this 2001, 2002, 2003. And this is actually property 1 is A, so that is 2001 is 100, 120, and 150, and that is exactly 100, 120, 150. So you got this row visualized as this point location, and the metadata and the time series is corresponding to the metadata and time series of that particular location. Okay, so now you got a glimpse of how you can visualize your own data set in this system. And yeah, of course, once you have an account, you will have a server space where you can upload your data, or if it is a very, very big data, it might be the case that you might need to reach out to us, and we might work together to visualize the data set. Now, that's, I think, pretty much sum up how you do it. I would encourage you to explore all these codes that you have here, and also explore the documentation a little bit to see how actually we can use this programmable interface. But I hope you enjoyed today's session, and thank you all for attending. We are almost running out of time. If you have more questions, please reach out to me at d.mondal@usask.ca. At this address. Okay, so I'll be looking forward to communicating with you in future. Thank you very much. Bye for now.